I'm sitting here, however, as a white man who's come to India and is only getting roles because I'm playing white people. When you see an Indian person, or Pakistani, or Bangladeshi, or Jamaican, or Nigerian, or whatever they are, all of which were colonies of the British Empire. From my understanding, the almost 200 years of British colonial rule was not a pleasant experience for most Indians. So I tend to look at it as, and we use the term generational trauma, that Indians still, I don't know whether suffer is the right word, but are still dealing with today. Controlling them, taking from them, stealing with them, they won't even notice because they're too busy fighting amongst themselves. Right. And they exploited that. They said, okay, let's make them hate each other even more. Whether we like it or not, most of us are somehow being exposed to some aspect of Indian culture in some way. Obviously, in England now, in the UK, curries, what I call the Indian restaurant, is the most popular dish. It's the most popular type of food for people to eat. It also has a responsibility to show India as it is, as I said, as the mixed, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multicolored.
Hello and welcome to The Big Question. I am Sonal Sharma and today we're in conversation with Benedict Garrett, a British Bollywood bodybuilder and actor living in Bombay. In the last 4 years living in India, he has worked in 22 films and 9 web series across multiple languages. And apart from being a versatile actor, he is known for speaking up against racism, and he also covers topics like colonial history on his social media. And he's here chatting with me on The Big Question. Welcome to Famous TV, Benedict.
Thank you.
And since you've lived in India for some time now, I want to ask you, कैसे हैं आप?
मैं बहुत बढ़िया.
That's lovely, absolutely lovely. So you worked on many productions on big Indian film sets.
Yes.
The real big question is India as a nation still under colonial hangover? And how does it reflect in Indian cinema? And what's your take on that?
Big question, very suitable, obviously. In fact, I've been here exactly for 4 years now, today. First of all, I just want to pick up on the word hangover, and I know it's a term that is used, but you see, hangover is like a metaphor for when you get drunk. You get drunk, and then the following day you feel terrible, you feel ill, and it lasts, and you need to take some aspirin or eat some fried food or whatever it is you do. And it also implies the night before you've gone out and gotten drunk, and it was a fun experience, and it was enjoyable, and it was positive. From my understanding, the almost 200 years of British colonial rule was not a pleasant experience for most Indians. So I tend to look at it as, and we use the term generational trauma, that Indians still, I don't know whether suffer is the right word, but are still dealing with today. Funnily enough, yesterday in the UK, it was Holocaust Memorial Day. And it's marked every single year. Every single year we have a Holocaust, rightly so. The Holocaust was a terrible chapter of human history. Awful. We mark it every single year. We have Memorial Day on November the 11th, where we remember all the soldiers who died, particularly in the First World War and the Second World War, and then wars since then. We remember that, rightly so. Every year on Victory in Europe Day, there's a memorial. Rightly so. We need to remember these things. There's not one day in the British calendar where we have, let's remember the atrocities committed by the British Empire Day.
Absolutely.
Not once. Now, one of the ways I learned about the Holocaust and the way the Holocaust was brought to life to me, because that was the first event that I really learned about in school and was taught about, was through films. Schindler's List, I watched. I remember watching one about the Warsaw Uprising. And films, when done well, they really bring these moments of human history to life. I so admired the actors in those types of films because you're playing real people going through real events and you have to really immerse yourself into that. Now, if that's okay in the West for people to think about watching those films about those events, and the Second World War, the Holocaust ended in 1945. The British didn't get the hell out of India until 1947. There are people still alive today who were born under British colonial rule. Amitabh Bachchan was born under British colonial rule.
Right.
And even if he doesn't remember it, he was brought up by parents he lived with he knew uncles and aunts and other members of the family who grew up living under British colonial rule. Are there lots of films in Indian cinema that have tackled this time period? Yes, there are, rightfully so. But one thing I find when I'm speaking to a lot of Indian people, particularly younger Indian people, is even they don't know much about their own history or as much as they should do. They perhaps learned about some of the freedom fighters,
right?
Because that's an important part of the history, and then some of the key figures or the people that were involved in the struggle for independence, and the people who were then involved around the period of when independence occurred. The people who wrote the Constitution, that sort of stuff. Again, rightfully so. But there's so many aspects of British Empire rule that don't even seem to be covered in Indian education, or in quite a lot of Indian education, let alone British education. And for me, I feel that there is a responsibility for the Bollywood film and Indian film industries to cover and talk about those events, because they still do have a lasting impact on the India of today. Now, I don't think we can sit here and blame everything, all the problems that might exist in India today, on what happens during colonial. Of course not. Politicians have to take responsibility now, as citizens have to take responsibility now in building the India they want for the future. Of course they do. But we all have to understand how things started, where things came from, why places are like how they are. And one of the best forums, one of the best media to do that is through filmmaking, because it can really bring these things to life. And that's why I feel my role as an actor is such an important one in these types of, obviously I've been in comedies as well, fun films, different films serve different purposes. But one important aspect of films is to also tell our human story, our human journey, explain it to the world and from the different perspectives. Right. When I grew up, I don't remember, I didn't watch any film about the British Empire anywhere in the world. The only film I remember learning about anything to do with India from, but I didn't even watch it until I was older, was I knew that there was a film called Gandhi. That was it. But that was a Western-made film,
right?
Set in India.
Yeah.
It didn't even have Ben Kingsley, I think he's half Indian, I believe, but he wasn't an Indian actor. He was a British actor playing an Indian character. So it was very much a Western-led film, really.
Since you mentioned a lot of, watching a lot of Holocaust movies, they're still being made. We still hear about those stories, but we never hear about the stories of independence of India in the Western world.
You're absolutely right.
Why do you think those movies are not doing the Oscar rounds, or like movies like Mangal Pandey? Why are they not doing well, or are not appreciated by the Western world?
I think there's quite possibly several reasons for that. Oh, and one thing I didn't mention, and maybe also, like in India, even in India, I would actually like to see more films. But I also think I'll come back to that question in a minute. I just also wanted to say as well, that a lot of Indians I meet, because I said they didn't know much about their own history, they also seem to be deluded into the fact that the British did some good things here in India.
Yeah, like
there were things in India that the Britain did to benefit India. Nothing Britain did was done to benefit India. Are there things the British may have left in India when they got the hell out of India that have benefited India? Well, yeah, I mean, there were railways. So we'll go on about the railways. Railways that Indians had to pay for. Railways that the Indian labour had to actually build, probably being paid virtually nothing. And who benefited the shareholders? Where were the shareholders? In their rich big houses in London. That's where they were. So yeah, maybe that. And were there bridges? Yes, there were bridges that were left behind, that were built by. Yeah, do you know what? Every country in the world pretty much has bridges and railways. They didn't need British people to help them build them. It's just technology that went around the world. Right. So yeah, the British left some things and some nice buildings, nice looking buildings that Indians actually physically built in India, but they weren't built to benefit India in any way whatsoever. So if Bollywood has been making those films, and enough of them, the message would have gotten out there and the reality of the history would have gotten out there. But we're still seeing huge numbers of even Indian people in India who are ignorant about their own history.
Right.
And why? So then why are they not being made in the West as well. If the West is making films about the Holocaust, if the West is making films, for example, other genocides, like a really good film is Hotel Rwanda, which is about the genocide in Rwanda. They're making it about that. Why are they not making it about what has happened in India? Well, first of all, I think because that opens a whole Pandora's box. Because if any of the Western powers, bear in mind, in India alone, there was the British, they were the biggest colony here, but there was also the French, like in Pondicherry. You had, obviously in Goa, you have the Portuguese up until only a few decades ago. The Dutch were here for a while as well. And all those colonies had other colonies elsewhere, and they were all involved in slavery.
Yeah.
Did you know that up until 2015, British descendants of British slave owners were being still paid compensation money by British taxpayers for having lost their slaves?
Yeah. But when we talk about Indian cinema, do you feel like when the way we portray our actors, like light-colored skin actors get to play affluent parts and stuff, how does that make you feel? Do you feel that there's some sort of a colonial hangover in those films?
Well, there's certainly, first of all, it makes me feel sad, to be honest with you. But again, this is not to excuse it, but that's understanding where does that come from. Now, colorism to an extent always did exist because there was always a caste system. And some of that, and there are aspects of that related to then the color of your skin, because if you're in a lower caste, you tended to work outside more and then you would get more sun on your face, for instance. But the British and all colonial powers actually, and even now you'll see it in the West, they ruled by divide and rule. Because if you keep people divided, they'll be arguing amongst themselves and they'll be too busy, too preoccupied to bother us. And then we can get on with controlling them, taking from them, stealing with them. They won't even notice because they're too busy fighting amongst themselves. So the British came in and they saw that in some parts of India, not everywhere, was there a caste system. The caste system is not mutually across the whole of Hindu communities in India. Right. And they exploited that. They said, okay, let's make them hate each other even more. And then of course, we've got Hindus and there's other large community called Muslims. Right. We'll make them hate each other even more as well. Not that there was, people naturally divide themselves sometimes and there's already divisions, but the British made it worse because it helped them to focus on taking everything they could. Right. Deindustrializing, just stealing, looting. They looted the word loot from India. That was a Hindi word.
Yeah, and guru.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely.
So colorism for me is it's a sad thing, and in some ways, I kind of feel like, but it should be the other way around, surely. That it should be people with darker skins who should be admired more, because the ones with lighter skins, they were the ones who colluded with the British. Right. Well, they worked in the offices, working for the Brits, and yet people still look up to that as if it's some kind of sign of, So I think that it is sad that still exists, because as far as I'm concerned, every skin color is beautiful. Right. And there are very talented actors who are very dark skinned, Yeah. But it is shocking when you look at an advert, when you look at almost every single advert, you think, are Indians only pale skin? Because every single advert seems to be somebody with a very light skin. Right. So that is sad, but that is a hangover of the British looking up, and you notice it in India amongst certain, I hate saying class, but certain classes of people. There are wealthier people, for example, who speak English very well, but because they've had a good education, they speak English, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I would love to speak lots of languages very well, and obviously English, because of the past, is a global language. But they tend to be very well traveled. They've gone, and they often go to London quite regularly. They have houses in London quite often. Yeah. And they create this impression that white is better, and particularly British is better. Right. And yet I think, but what happened did you not see what happened for almost 200 years? Right. But they benefited. They're the ones living in the big penthouses in Lower Parel, Right. They're the ones with the 20-story houses. But no, I mean, So that's what they see. They see London, the city that was created from stolen wealth from all around the world, banks that were financed because of trillions and trillions and trillions of pounds worth of money stolen, particularly from India, because that was the largest. And it wasn't, when I talk about India at the time, it was what is now India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all those regions. Just wealth completely looted. And you go to London and people and Indians and everybody loves going to India. Oh, it's a beautiful city. What a wonderful building. What a, this is an amazing city. Like, yeah. Bloody stole it from your country, mate.
Right.
A lot of it.
Right. So a lot of times, are those the reasons why our filmmakers are still chasing the West, still chasing Oscars, or celebrities and influencers still wanting that, picture on the can, red carpet?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of the attention has shifted to the USA, of course. The USA is also now seen as and particularly when it comes to media and filmmaking, is seen as the center for Hollywood, particularly as the place to be. But again, the USA is a country of Anglo-Saxon origins. It's most of the big Hollywood celebrities are white on the whole. So it is this very Western ideal that people still have. Now, I'm not saying you can't have all these ideals. You like what you like. It's absolutely fine for an Indian person to speak English well and want to do things that people who happen to live in Britain do. But this sense of superiority around it that you sometimes see, that, they speak English very well. They go to London every year. They do, and that makes them a better person in some way.
Yeah.
That is a very colonial hangover.
So do you think, is it superiority complex or inferiority complex?
Well, I think in some ways it's a little bit of both. Because if they had the confidence in themselves to say, I'm Indian, I love who I am. Yeah, you can take influences from all over the place. I don't mind, I'm not saying Indians can't wear Western clothes. I'm not saying Indians can't do what, Indians can, we all have our own identity, but you don't have to emulate mold your whole existence about trying to be something else.
Yep.
So I think some of that is probably rooted in a certain inferiority complex, because one of the things people talk about with the generational trauma is the treatment by the British of Indians was making them feel lesser, making them feel inferior in their own country.
Yeah.
They could only do certain jobs. There were clubs where only white people were allowed. There were parts of the city, even here in Mumbai, there were parts of the city where only white people could live. People's lives were completely controlled. And if they rioted, if they tried to protest, it was shot.
Yeah.
Back in the UK, your poor people also there didn't have it good. They were still poor. They still lived in slummy areas. They were still treated like crap. But they were treated a whole lot better than what people in India, people in Africa, people in the Middle East were treated by the colonial rulers.
Right.
And this was the point I was trying to make earlier. The problem is if the West starts making too many films or starts touching on this subject, then it opens this whole Pandora's box. The thing is, a lot of white people that I've having posted the videos I've been posting recently on my Instagram, what I've noticed, and I knew this anyway, having grown up there, is it's not that a lot of white people don't know about these things, even though they don't know much about these things. They may have heard, oh yeah, we did bad stuff. But they'll excuse it. They first will excuse it, say, but lots of colonies did bad stuff. Happened everywhere. And then it was a long time ago, forget about it. But then we say, Holocaust, 1945. British left India, 1947. And in 1943, at the same time the Holocaust was going on, Winston Churchill was starving people in Bengal. Not because there weren't the crops, there were the crops. They could have been fed, but he wanted the crops to feed the troops in Europe, including, by the way, in the Second World War, over 1 million Indian soldiers who were serving there to defend Britain, not defend India, because after Britain won the war, the Indians had to get kicked back into India, to their villages, and they didn't get any help at all. They were still living under the control of the British, controlling their lives and telling them how to live their lives. They didn't get freedom from fighting in the Second World War. They got nothing. A lot of them didn't even get any kind of pension or any financial reward for what they did. So it opens this whole Pandora's box of people recognizing and having to admit, because they'd rather not. Most white people in Europe, actually most white people around the whole world live fairly comfortable lives. Yep. There are some poorer areas. I mean, in the USA, there are some shitty areas. Most of where black people live and some other ethnic minorities. And so there are some grotty parts where some white people, even in England, there's some grottier parts. But you know what, even in some of those grotty parts, some people in the poorer parts of the world would probably give their left foot to live there, you know? So most white people live a very comfortable life. And most white people don't want to change that, right, to be honest. And they're scared. If we admit that the whole history of the British Empire was built on murder, genocide, greed, selfishness, abuse, rape, pillaging, looting, and nothing good, if we can't say we did anything good because we thought we did something good, then we have to say, okay, well, that was really wrong. And we have to then it then perhaps opens the floodgates to thinking about, well, maybe we should be doing things to give back to those more to give back to those communities. Maybe you're talking about compensation in some way. Maybe. I mean, there's the debate, but then they would have to have the debate. They'd have to admit that it's worthwhile having the debate. They don't want to have the debate. It opens up a whole kind of, and then it's not just Britain, of course. It's the French Empire, colony. It's the Belgian Empire. It's the Dutch Empire. It's the Portuguese. It's the Spanish. Even the Scandinavians had empires at some point.
Right.
So the whole of Europe is like, we don't want to talk this late. This was too long ago. We don't want to talk about this.
But should Indian filmmakers and Indian film industry push this narrative?
Yes. Yeah, they should. But I mean, first of all, they have to tell their own story. They have to tell their own story to their own people, to Indians. Indians have to understand. And that's not, I don't want Indians to be hating people. Of course I don't. I don't want to do it so they turn around and say, we hate British people. No, I mean, there is no British person alive today who was involved, as far as I'm aware. I mean, there may be some very old people who served in the 90s or 100s, maybe served in India, maybe. But most British people alive today had nothing to do with the British Empire.
Right.
But we've all benefited in some way. Okay, we didn't benefit as much as the rich people. The royal family obviously benefited the most, and then very wealthy people benefited. But I benefited. I benefited from having my social welfare system financed for a long time. Obviously, we pay taxes now.
Yeah.
But I had free education. My parents didn't have to pay a single penny. Did you have a free education? Was it free?
I mean, my father was in the army, so my
Oh, okay. But most people in India, even the poor people, have to pay usually something to send their children. Maybe it's just a few rupees, but you have to pay something. Mine was entirely free. If I break my leg, if I hurt myself, I can go to hospital. I pay nothing.
Yeah.
And I get the NHS is a pretty good standard of care.
Yeah.
I get that. How was that financed? Okay, yeah, sure. People are paying their taxes now. But straight after the Second World War, straight after the 19th, that was when the NHS was established, using some of it, the stolen wealth taken from India. So I had better quality of living. I had the better access to these services because I happened to drop out of somebody in a certain country, and then I could access those things. But to what cost? Well, I'll tell you what cost. To the cost of people in India, to the cost of people in Africa, who couldn't have those things because that was taken from them. When the East India Company arrived in India, and the Indian subcontinent was the wealthiest region of the planet. It produced around 25% of the global GDP. Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of that wealth was concentrated in wealthy people. You had the Mughal rulers, of course, and that's another history. And people often say to me, why didn't you criticize the Mughal rulers? Well, first of all, I'm British. So I focus on my own history and the responsibility of the things we did. Yeah, there were problems under the Mughals, but they didn't drain the wealth out of India to the same extent. They stayed in India. The Mughals lived in India. They built communities in India. They wanted to create their own communities, however brutal or wrong they were.
Right.
That's a whole other story. But the British, they drained India. They didn't give a crap about India, a crap about Indians. They wanted to take just for themselves. Mostly for the rich people who are still living off that generational wealth. You see any big, nice house that all the tourists want to go to in England, a lot of that will be stolen wealth from India and other places, but particularly India, because India was this huge land, a part of the British Empire that provided so much. So I've forgotten what I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of Pandora's box that we're talking about. People recognizing they have to admit that it's benefited them in some way. And they don't want to look at themselves like that. They don't want to think that the poverty that they see on TV in other places is caused by them.
Right.
And it's not. I didn't cause it, but me saying I recognize that the things that were done in my country, not even my ancestors. My mum has done a family tree back 500 years. None of them came to India. None of them were soldiers in India. They didn't involve themselves. They were just poor farmers, most of them. I'd done my dad's family tree 200 years. None of them came to India. So they weren't, none of my family were involved. I can say that I put my hands up, right?
Yeah.
But I grew up in a country where I benefited because of what my country did in my name.
Right. But does that history still weigh on the Indian film industry though? By the way of how we portray our main actors or our main leads, or the way we...
Oh, in that sense, not even just in the content of the films, because there are plenty of films which are dealing with those kind of issues like that.
Right.
Like, for example, Watan Meri Watan was about the underground radio station that I was in.
Right.
There are series, Freedom After Midnight is dealing with the independence thing. So there's subject matter, but are you talking about how the casting goes?
Yeah, how the casting goes, and how do we depict our main leads? How do we want to show affluent people? Usually, there's a lot of colorism involved.
Yes. I think there probably still is a hangover. I mean, I think we are beginning to see more actors from more diverse backgrounds, of different looks and different skin tones, who are beginning to break through.
Since you work in the South Indian industry as well, you did see a lot of the actresses are mostly North Indian. So if you think about it, there is a type that...
But in the West there's a type, isn't there? I mean, for a long time in Hollywood, you saw blonde hair, blue-eyed, big busted white women. That was the standard,
Right.
So it's not like India's not immune to that. It's just that's the type that has been promoted in India all the time. I mean, people are still obsessed with buying products like, what's it called, Fair and Lovely, or to make their skin look their skin look like lighter.
How does that make you feel being from the UK?
Well, yeah, of course, in the UK, we try to make our skin look brown. Us white people, we like going in the sun and looking brown, and we feel that makes us look healthy. So that's rather ironic. But yeah, I mean, it does make me feel sad, because I think I see so many beautiful people, and the tone of their skin is not something that I even really look at. I look at the whole thing. I think that person's beautiful, and sometimes they can be really dark, And I just wish that the industry was able to reflect that more.
Right.
So I think that yes, there is that hangover, and you think of some of the main biggest actresses, they tend to be lighter skin. I mean, they even imported some actresses. Amy Jackson.
Right. Yeah.
She looked because Shankar. She's from England, from Liverpool. Yeah. He saw her when I worked for Shankar. He saw her when he was working in England one time.
Yeah.
And he thought she was beautiful. And then she comes in and then she plays Indian people.
Right.
Sometimes.
And she's not.
She's not Indian in any way. She's 100%. Well, whatever, 100%. We're all a mishmash of something. We're all Mongols in some way, but she's not Indian, and she couldn't. Apparently she couldn't speak any of the languages before she nor could I. But I'm admitting that I'm not. I've never had to play an Indian in an Indian film.
But we also love these actresses.
Yes.
Speaking of Amy Jackson, for example, you think so? Is it the industry that's under the hangover, or is it the audience?
Oh, that's I'm going to say egg and what's it? Chicken and egg, but that's actually not. The egg came first. Right. Don't believe anybody who tells you that you can't answer that question. The answer is the egg, because there has to be an egg for that the first chicken came out. So it's an egg, right? But on this one, which is first? Is the industry following what the viewers want, or is it the viewers watching what the industry gives them? Well, if the industry didn't think they would sell films, then they wouldn't do it, would they? And what sells films is bums on seats and people buying the tickets. And it's undeniable that paler skin has, historically speaking, been something that people look up to, people aspire to, because of the history here. And it's not only in India. People in Africa, want to have paler skin as well. Amongst the black community, they talk about, oh, he's lovely, light-skinned person. A light skin is something that they aspire to as well. And again, I assume it's because of the colonial past, the colonial background, that people, like for example, in Rwanda, it was the Tutsis who tended to work for the Belgian government because they looked more European. They were pale and they had more European features. So again, it's all about looks.
Yeah.
And yes, it's a shame that Bollywood can't embrace the diversity of India. I mean, for example, I can't think of what big stars come from. There probably are, but I can't think because I'm not that aware. What big stars come from Northeast India?
Right.
What Assami or Sikkim? Are there any big female Bollywood actresses who've come to Mumbai from Northeast India and become massive actresses? There must be somebody, but not many.
Not someone that the name comes
No.
to your mind immediately.
Look at the president of India.
Maybe
Drupadi.
Manisha Koirala? Manisha Koirala?
I don't know. Yeah,
Probably.
maybe, but it's not a big number that you see. Look at your president, Drupadi. What's her name? Drupadi Murmu. That's it. She's lovely dark skin.
Yeah.
So in politics, we're seeing women of all sorts of looks, breaking through and being being the head of state in India now.
Yeah.
But that's still not being reflected in
the movies.
In the movies.
And television.
And movies surely should also be a reflection of real life.
Right.
I think that's why actually what is improving in India, and I think this is improving. I think we are overcoming slightly because of OTT.
Yeah.
Like on Netflix, for instance, you're seeing a lot of actors who you'd never seen before in Bollywood, in big Bollywood films. You're seeing a lot of actors who are really making names for themselves on Netflix or on Prime, for instance, because on those platforms they're making the kind of productions that Bollywood wasn't making sometimes.
Right. We're doing more regional stuff as well.
And yes, exactly. And more regional stuff. And also the wonderful thing about the internet now as well, as I said, when I was younger, all we'd ever watch was British films, American films. That's pretty much mostly it. Maybe the odd Australian production or Canadian, but that was it. Mostly that's all we saw, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now you can go on the internet and I can watch a film from anywhere.
Yeah.
A lot of people are watching Korean cinema is massive.
Right.
Lots of people watching, Squid Games, for instance, at a Korean cinema. That's a huge thing. Young people in India are obsessed with anime from Japan. A lot of Spanish series have been quite popular on Netflix, and things from Turkey, things from all over the world you can watch now, and you're exposed to. So you're seeing lots of different looking people and different ideas of beauty as well. And also it's a regional cinema from India. Right. Can be more easily seen as well.
So do you think people back home are watching Indian movies or Indian television shows like on Netflix or anything like that?
I don't know if they're watching it. I don't know if there's been a massive shift, but I know people are more. I've had people who didn't necessarily know that I was in something message me saying, "Oh, I was watching The Railwaymen," for instance. That was one that was watched by quite a lot of people around the world. We saw you in The Railwaymen. Oh, I'm pleased that you actually you're watching it. Yeah. Obviously, a lot of the international audience are often Indian diaspora people living in those countries, but I think more and more people are watching Indian films and cinema from all around the world. I mean, a lot of the big productions, like obviously Jawan was on Netflix, so a lot of people were watching that. So yes, I think your Indian cinema is gaining a new audience that wasn't there 10, 15 years ago, and I think that's brilliant. But also because Indian cinema is particularly because of regional cinema, producing the kind of productions that people might not necessarily expect from India as well. So I think it's people are being pleasantly surprised by the kind of productions that India is producing. Yes, there's your big, masala films, and people love that, and people enjoy that. My parents now, they'd never watched an Indian film before I was in it, but my dad, he loves Indian films now.
Oh wow! Wonderful.
Oh, he adores it, and my mum loves it as well, but she's not quite as expressive as my father. My mum's much more controlled. Right. So yeah, I think it is being much more watched. Which is why it's important for India to tell its story. because now it has the opportunity to not only educate its own people and give its message to its own people, but to the whole world as well.
Right.
And India is, you know, let's not forget, India is the most populous country in the world.
Yeah.
It's a huge country.
Right.
It's now fourth or third largest GDP. I think it just overtook Japan recently. I think it was certainly fourth. It took over the UK a couple of years ago, and so economically, it's becoming a real powerhouse. Militarily, obviously, it's important. India is one of the most important countries in the world. You can't ignore it. You know, there's only several countries in the world which have that kind of presence in the world. And also it has a massive influence on our cultures all around the world. And Indian people, for various reasons, historically speaking, but also now because, Indians particularly value education an awful lot. Indians have gotten all around the world, you know, to be nook and cranny, every small, I would say Indians are you probably find an Indian in almost every country, I would think. At some point, whether we like it or not, most of us are somehow being exposed to some aspect of Indian culture in some way. Obviously, in England now, in the UK, curries, what they call them, you know, Indian restaurant, is the most popular dish. You know, it's the most popular type of food for people to eat, and that's only one little thing, of course. But it just goes to show the impact of India on the world. So it does have a responsibility, and it also has a responsibility to show India as it is, as I said, as the mixed, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multicolored culture and society that it is.
That is something Indian filmmakers and the film industry can work on.
Yes,
showing
indeed.
the true side of India, which is multiple.
Absolutely, yes. Because and I love people who smash stereotypes. For example, a lot of people look at me. If you just look at me, even in England, this happens a lot. People look at me, oh, there's a skinhead, he's got muscles, he's probably just a thicko kind of, you know, vacuous, boring, gym-obsessed idiot. And maybe some people do think that. But I would hope that a lot of the time I smash people's stereotypes that they assume. Well, I love it when that happens as well, in films, in music, in all aspects of culture. I love people who give you something completely different than what you expect, and aren't afraid to challenge stereotypes or go against the grain a little. And so it may have to take some filmmakers to go against that grain and be brave, but and they are, I think. I mean, Toxic, the Gito Mohandas, I think she's being very brave and experimental with the type of production she's putting out there, and she's going to get criticism. She already has.
Right.
That's the thing, and particularly in India, but not only in India, everywhere around the world, you're always going to get criticism. If you do anything that's worthwhile, you're going to have people that love it, you're going to have people that hate it. You should be worried when people don't say anything.
Right.
I have a director friend back in England. He said, if I make a film and there are people who love it and people who absolutely hate it, I'm like, yes, that's brilliant. If people are just like, yeah, it was all right, it's okay. He felt like he failed.
Right. Because it's about expression.
It's about expression, and you're never going to have it, because that's the beauty of humanity. People like different things and are passionate about different things, and so people will love it. People will people will hate it. But you've got to be scared not to take that risk sometimes. And I think particularly the Bollywood part of Indian film industry, I think people see it as, because it seems to be very much it's very much obsessed with the commercial aspect. It's a money, obviously it's all trying to make money,
right?
But Bollywood particularly seems to be very formulaic, and it's just about churning out big popular films that are going to bring in the money. And that may be true to some extent, but I think there is still the ability, even within that limited framework, for filmmakers to be braver in the content that they produce.
Right. So finally, now, in your experience, how's your personal life been living in India?
I don't think it's an exaggeration for me to say I think it was probably the best thing I've done in my life, to be honest. It hasn't been easy. It's been stressful at times.
Right.
But I love living here. I love it. And that's not to say India's perfect. It's not, but I'm not going to, it's not, every country is flawed. And India certainly has its flaws. It's not for me to point those out. Indians know more than, better than me, the things that frustrate them about their country. But I feel like I'm alive in India. and India's given me and I'm very grateful for, and I never take this for granted. It's about that India's given me an opportunity that I wasn't able to really. I tried to do the acting as my main thing in the UK. I tried to do it, and then I had to come to the realization that, okay, look, you got to focus on other stuff for a while. India's given me the opportunity to do that, and I'm very lucky. So I'm finally at a point in my life where I feel like I'm doing what I want to do, but also I'm doing it with a purpose. And I found that purpose after coming to India, because obviously I wanted to do acting. But being in India, it's married different parts of my life, because I did the politics when I was younger. And what drove me to do the politics was my desire to want to make the world a better place, to fight for the rights of people, to stand up for the underdog. That was really what drove me. And so being in India, then doing half the time doing the type of films that I do, which are historical kind of films, it's given me an added purpose and an understanding of the importance of what I do. When I was 16 and I decided to study politics, I said to myself, no, acting's it's pointless. It's silly. It's just silly. And it's all self-obsessed and self-involved, and it's all about me, right? Because a lot of actors are, they need a bit of attention, and maybe we didn't have when we were kids. Although I had very good parents. I can't complain about it. My parents are wonderful people. But being in India has also made me understand, no, films are actually, they're more than just entertainment. They are entertainment, and that on its own is important enough. But you also have a responsibility. You're also helping people to understand their own stories. And it's made me feel like I've found a purpose in life. I'm not a religious person, so when people say to me, what's the purpose of life? I say there is no purpose. And that is the purpose of life. It's you decide what the purpose of your life is. Right. And that gives it purpose. You give it purpose, rather than there being some sort of predestined purpose that I think exists. And some people do, and that's fine. I don't. I think you make the purpose what you want it to be. And now I found what I want my purpose to be, and I'm trying to do it. Do I always do it? No. Do I sometimes miss? Of course. I'm only human. Do I do it every day? No. I spend days on just wasting my time. I'm just time passing. I'm just watching crap on television, or just, being very self-involved, Of course I do. I'm only human. But generally, I'm on a path, and India has allowed me to do that. And India has also opened my eyes to, first of all, my own history, opened my eyes to a whole different side of life, of humans, that I never allowed myself to see before. India is a country that every day, I think, I kind of have to remind myself that I'm here, because it almost feels like a dream in some way. It almost doesn't feel real. I'm not saying that because I think India's perfect and I'm living like some heaven on earth. What I'm saying is, it feels almost surreal, because in some aspects, it's so different to how I grew up. And in other ways, you realize, but we're all human and we're all the same, and there's so many similarities between. And yet, on the other side of the planet, there's a whole other part of humanity doing its thing. And India's always been here. People in India were doing all this stuff before I came, and I was living my little life back in whichever country I was in before. And India is a country where you feel alive every day. People at the gym may ask, and they go to me, kaise ho, and I go, main zinda hu. I go, har din main zinda hu, sab bahut acha hai, bas main zinda hu, kafi hai. Huh. As long as I wake up alive, I'm happy. That's all I need. I've got another day to enjoy being alive, being here, walking out on. I often walk to my gym because I like walking. And okay, the roads are terrible. There's no pavement half the way down. It's all full of potholes, but I feel so at home in the area that I live. The people are so friendly, so sweet, so kind. They all say to me, hey, Bendi bhai, they all, and I've never really felt like that anywhere I've ever lived. I've always met people. I've always had friends. I've always but you have to go out of your way in usually in the West to really feel that you have to join some club or some society or go and hang out somewhere in order to become friendly with people, and you have to really keep trying at those friendships, and then eventually you become closer and closer and closer. In India, you can't help but become everybody's friend very quickly, and they embrace you. Now, I'm also conscious that might be because I'm white and British. Right. Maybe, for example, there are Nigerian people who live around my area, they don't always get the same reception for everybody. So again, that's, colonial hangover.
Right, absolutely.
And yet both those countries, because they're from Nigeria, had to deal with the same experience. Absolutely. And I would have thought, you want to be friendly with somebody, you should be friendly with the Nigerian, not the British white guy. You should hate him. And then they shouldn't.
Right.
I shouldn't, because I wasn't around then, but yeah. But I'm saying it's more rational for you to embrace the Nigerian because you've gone through such a similar experience than me. Because I could quite understand Indians who think, yeah, but he's British, it's in their blood, they're just evil. It's in their veins. That's all they're used to. They're used to just stealing, raping, pillaging, murdering. That's what British people are. I could quite understand if people felt like that.
Right. But
so maybe I should be grateful that there's colonial hangover because people give me more respect than I deserve.
I feel Indian people are generally more welcoming, but like you mentioned, the treatment can differ.
I mean, having said that, there were people who were very nice to the Nigerian people. They're very friendly with them as well. Right. But I have heard some racist comments as well.
Absolutely.
So it exists everywhere. But I'm trying to deal with my own in that respect. But for me, India, I see myself growing old here. I found a place here. I feel like I belong. I've been very lucky to be able to do the career I love, and I want to keep building on that. And I see myself maybe expiring here one day. Wow. It's a place I just feel very comfortable and that I could belong here.
Well, we feel that you've been doing some great work.
Thank you.
On your social media handles as well, trying to spread that, the information that people probably back home don't have.
They don't. They don't. I mean, I said the education, we learned nothing, and it hasn't changed apparently about British Empire. We learned nothing apart from there's a map, there's a bit. We learned a little bit about slavery, but in terms of India, nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, even as the British, the Indian soldiers, overall, it's 2.5 million, World War I, World War II, and over 150,000 who died.
Right.
I don't ever remember learning that.
Yeah. There's no mention.
If it is, it's briefly mentioned. Briefly mentioned, maybe, but I don't remember.
Yep.
And one of my motive for doing it are actually two things, for doing those videos. It's less so about Indians in India, actually. It's because of my experience of living in India that I'm doing it. But my motivation is for two types of people.
Yeah.
One of them is for the racist, I call them racist dipshits. I don't know if I can say that one here. The racist idiots in England. Now, I don't think most of them are going to get the message. Most of them are thick as two short planks. But some of them might. And maybe if they don't get the message, people who maybe know them can listen to what I was saying, and they can try using that angle. Because if I believe if more British people did know their history, we were educated about the bad things that we did, at the very minimum, because I'm not asking British people to do anything. I'm not asking you to give any money. I'm not asking you to give up anything. I'm not asking you to change anything. There is only one thing I'm asking you to do. Just don't be a racist piece of shit. That is it. That's the only one thing. Just go through life not being racist. When you see an Indian person, or Pakistani, or Bangladeshi, or Jamaican, or Nigerian, or whatever they are, all of which were colonies of the British Empire. When you see them in the street, don't shout the N-word at them or the P-word if they're Indian, or tell them to go back home. Just don't do that. That's all you need to do. You could try being nice. You could try being a nice first, but I'm not even asking you to do that because that might be too much of a struggle. The one thing I'm asking you not to do is just don't be a nasty, racist piece of shit. Because sadly, and it's not the majority, but that does still exist. So that's one type of person. Bear in mind, I had a foster son, and my foster son was British Pakistani. I remember being in a shop. Remember, I had a skinhead at the time. I remember being in a shop in Liverpool, and I was being served. And my son, he was still in the shop. And I think and this white person, this little white lad joined the queue behind me. And then behind him, I think my son was still just hanging out trying to decide what. And this guy, I can't remember what he said, but he said something racist about my son. Talked to me because he thought, oh, he's a white guy with a skinhead. He'll think it's funny what I'm saying. And I was not very polite to him. I swore at him and I told him, that's my son you're talking about. And he ran out of that shop as quickly as he possibly could. So I see the ugly side, but I've seen the ugly side throughout my whole life because I grew up with white people. I grew up in a white family. Not that my family is not racist, but they may sometimes have said things that were ignorant. They may sometimes have said things that were, that could be deemed as offensive. But I grew up in white spaces.
Right.
I have heard it my whole life. So that's one group. The other group of people that I'm really trying to target actually is people, predominantly, of course, of Indian background, because I'm in India, so British Indians, and anybody, wider speaking, of a non-white British person who's particularly from the British Empire. I want them to understand they belong there. That if anybody turns around to them and says, they can turn around and say, well, hang on, do you know how much my country helped build this country? Literally, physically, financially, dying, fighting to keep your democracy, to keep you free, not us free, but to keep you free. So they have the tools in their hands to go and not to get into arguments with these people, but just to rationally, calmly say, I know I belong. And for them to feel that they belong. Because there are times when I know, because I was a teacher. Most of my kids, 70, 80% of them were not white British. Largely Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, some Jamaican, Nigerians, a couple of other Turkish, for example, Somalian. I want them to know they have every right to be there. They belong there. You can't go around the world for centuries kicking down doors saying, this is ours, you do what we say. You're British now, you're British. All right, well then the moment they try to become British, oh, too many brown faces. And the problem is in Britain, we're seeing the rise of far-right movements, the Reform Party continually blaming immigrants. Right. So they're the type of people that I'm really trying to target. But I also hope and I get a lot of support from Indians as well. Indians also are finding some solace in what I'm saying. And I've had a lot of Indians, say to me, I didn't know this about my own history.
Right.
So we're all learning together. And I'm still learning. There are so many things I still don't know. I'm ignorant about lots of things.
Right. In fact, something that you posted about on Instagram was quite refreshing to hear when you said India gets contempt when it comes to development and cleanliness, whereas England got context even when it was, developing.
Of course. And the other thing is that people, the response I got from that, they would say, what about Singapore? What about Malaysia? What about all these other countries? Okay, well, first of all, some of them were also ruled by the British, but they were treated in entirely different ways. Right. And even they would say, what about Germany after the Second World War and Japan after the Second World War? They were ruined. They'd been bombed. And India got independence about the same time. Yeah, and then lots of American investment money went into both those countries. None of those countries that I just mentioned were treated, India was specifically for deindustrialization and taking as much of the resources and the wealth as they possibly could, no matter what happened. So you have to understand the context in every single country and how each of them is different, and then you understand. And again, the other comment I get from people, that was ages ago, we have problems in India now, we should be responsible now. Yeah, of course, yes, absolutely. Would not disagree with that at all, right? But you have to also understand where these things come from. And it wasn't like some British people said, yeah, we were colonized in England as well by the Romans, by the Vikings. And I'm like, well, do you know anybody alive who is still being tormented or suffering the trauma of having a Viking coming in and raping their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother? I don't know, do you? I think if any of us were still suffering the trauma of the Viking invasion, then maybe that might be an issue. Right. But India is still having to deal. And whilst, you know what? If I could get one thing, I would stop talking about this stuff. If British people would stop being racist pieces of shit, I wouldn't say anything. But whilst they are, I feel the need to speak up as a white British person. I will speak up and point out the idiots in amongst my own people. Because I've been there. I've been there. As a young person, I remember having the mentality, oh, I'm British, I'm white, we're superior, we feel good. You know, we're constantly told, we won the war, we had an empire, we're so good. You know, I remember thinking like that.
A lot of times in Indian films, we see that the male lead can be of any skin color, probably of any age, but the female lead has to be someone young or someone with a lighter skin tone. What's your take on that?
Well, the ageism thing, I mean, I think that's everywhere, even in the West and Hollywood. That's, you know, women often say that after a certain age, they can't get parts where the men can. And yeah, the lighter skin thing is, well, also you have to think, it's not only in India. I mean, all around the world, people of color find it harder to get, particularly lead parts. They may be like side parts or less, you know, junior actors, or you know, not the main, but to be the lead, there's a certain look. And obviously here in India, there is that certain look. I mean, I'm sitting here, however, as a white man who's come to India and is only getting roles because I'm playing white people. So I would be a bit of a hypocrite to say that I've not used something I was just born with, no talent whatsoever, to help me to get roles. So who can blame these actresses in a way? As I mentioned before, there was obviously Amy Jackson, completely white British. We did Katrina Kaif, half English, doing very well. But I think this is another case of what I said earlier, that we need to see some directors being brave enough and saying, well, hang on, we need some older women, some women of an older age, because they're still beautiful. Women are beautiful of all ages. And we need women of different skin tones as well, because India is a rainbow, you know, of many different colors. And there are some brilliant actresses out there who have darker skin, you know, and darker skin is beautiful as well. And like, listen, it's 2025 now. No, it's not. It's 26. We've had a new year. It's 2026 now.
Yeah.
So I think young people particularly are demanding more. And young people, you've got to remember that a lot of these audience are dark-skinned themselves. They want to see people on screen who
represent them.
They represent them, or they see themselves, or they think, I could also do this as well. I mean, maybe you're missing out on a huge amount of talented people who could be playing those roles, but they're not, just because of the color of their skin. You know, they could be, I don't know, better performers than some of them who are there. I don't know, you know, we don't know that because you're not opening your eyes to the possibility, because you think you're not going to put bums on seats.
Right.
Because she's not got fair enough skin, and that's very sad.
Yeah. So you speak about colorism across like countries, but when you see it within India, what does that make you feel?
Well, first of all, very sad, because I mean, what percentage of people in India are light skinned? You know, it's only a relatively small percent, I would say. So you're basically casting aspersion over a huge amount of your own population that they're not pretty enough, they're not beautiful enough, they don't represent the beauty that you want to be shown publicly. And also, you know, I have to recognize that where did that colorism come from? That comes from what we've been talking about, you know, a lot, not only, but a lot because of the colonial hangover that we've talked about. And then also this American ideal of beauty that we see all the time now. Obviously, we're much more globalized. We all have access to the internet, to the World Wide Web. We can all see all sorts of things. And sadly, the trend is global. It's young women, younger ladies of a certain age, and usually of a certain body frame, and usually even in countries where there are darker skinned people, it's people who are lighter versions of those darker skins all over the world, who pander to this coloristic view of beauty.
Right. And
yet your audience is not being, a huge chunk of your audience is not being represented.
Absolutely. It's unfair.
Very unfair, very unfair. And I would hope we can see directors who are brave with their storylines, brave with the subjects that they cover, and brave with the people that they put into those roles as well. Let's start shaking things up a bit. Let's stop sticking to a certain mold. The thing about sometimes you have to be experimental in the filmmaking as well. Sometimes films that do really well are ones you often least expect to. Or what I've also noticed with films that I've been in, sometimes they can be a flop in the cinema, but they do really well on OTT. So if you're just trying to chase the big bucks, your formula doesn't always work.
True. Right. Well, it's amazing that you do your bit, and thank you for that, and thank you for joining us today, Benedict. It was a lovely conversation.
Thank you.
It was as intriguing and thought-provoking as your Instagram reels.
Good.
So if anyone wants to hear Benedict talk about more such topics, please follow him on Instagram. You could tell us a little bit about your social media handles.
Yeah, it's Benedict Garrett. You may have to read below. I guess you'll have my name typed somewhere to find that. But yeah, Benedict Garrett, and I post the videos on Instagram. I'm also on Threads, which is linked to Instagram as well. And I do have a YouTube channel, but I don't use it as well as I should do. I need to follow your example and learn from you guys, I think.
For sure, we'll teach you. Thank you so much. Thank you for talking with us. And yeah, that's all on The Big Question today. We will be back with more such insightful conversations. So for now, this is Sonal Sharma signing off. Keep watching Famous TV.